Thanks for joining us. Peel Police cracking down on drivers this weekend with a major blitz at a problematic plaza in Mississauga. There's long been safety concerns in the area. As Nama Weingarten shows us, police have already laid a number of charges.
I'm at a traffic stop right now where we just caught an individual traveling 98 kilometers an hour in a posted 50 zone.
In what they call a strategic enforcement operation, Peel Regional Police are zeroing in on Mississauga's Ridgeway Plaza. Located in the area of Eglinton Avenue West and Ridgeway Drive, they say dangerous and disruptive behavior made it a hotspot for complaints from residents and businesses, who sometimes capture the incidents on video.
The problem is when there is pressures like large gatherings, road racing, it creates environmental impact on those who live in the area.
Over a dozen officers will be spending the night here at the plaza to address public safety concerns. Police say that so far, just between 9 p.m. and midnight Friday night, they conducted over 40 traffic stops, laid even more charges without specifying the number yet, impounded multiple vehicles, and dispersed large disruptive crowds. Just last month, a motorcyclist was killed in a collision in the area. At a city festival Saturday, we caught up with the local councillor for the ward where the plaza is located, who says he's heard complaints about stunt driving and loud gatherings there for a year now.
And this is having a negative impact and a negative, focus on the plaza. Families don't want to go there. They don't want to bring their kids there. So this has to stop.
Mississauga Mayor Carolyn Parrish was also at the event. And she says many of the safety issues at the plaza boil down to the fact that it has too many restaurants and food outlets.
And we can't control that. It's provincial regulations, but for some reason they all focused on that one and there's insufficient parking. As each individual restaurant goes to the Committee of Adjustment, they say, oh, we've got all these parking spots. But when you put them all together, there are not enough. So the cars are all over the place. It creates an atmosphere of recklessness, and it's just bad behavior.
This road safety advocate says the issue extends beyond Ridgeway.
Such incidents have been observed in other plazas around Peel region, especially in Trinity Mall in Brampton, Westwood Plaza in Malton.
This is not the first time police are doing this at the plaza. Last time was Labor Day weekend, when police say they laid nearly 250 driving-related charges and seized 14 vehicles. Nama Weingarten, CBC News, Mississauga.
A looming deadline means uncertainty for Air Canada passengers this weekend. The airline and the pilots union have until midnight to reach a deal and avoid a potential shutdown. Now, talks have been going on for more than a year. Air Canada releasing a statement with an update earlier today, saying it hasn't canceled any flights yet, but says once a possible wind down begins, it cannot avoid disruptions for several days. That's even if a deal is reached quickly. Joining me now is May Nam. She's a union lawyer based in Toronto. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, the clock is ticking. What do you make of the fact, May, that both sides are still at the table at this hour?
I would say that it's not uncommon for parties to really get down to the very last minute in trying to negotiate a deal. This is usually the moment where people are being driven to their absolute bottom line. And it is the basic process that happens, in the vast majority of contract negotiations, is that people are driving to getting to their bottom line and using deadlines like lockout deadlines and strike deadlines as this sort of pivotal moment in terms of leverage for both sides.
Yeah. You know, if pilots do strike, do you think that they would have public support? We've heard reports that the union turned down a 30% wage increase because it wasn't the 40% they were asking for. How do you think that would sit with Canadians?
Well, one of the things that I think would surprise Canadians is, on the one hand, we're hearing about what sounds like astronomical increases, but that's spread out over a number of years. So it isn't just like a 30% shot or a 40% shot. But I think the main issue is it's about parity and industry standards. And so the flip side of not paying your workers the proper rate, especially in a climate where we have shortages of workers, like, for example, nurses, in this case, pilots, people will just get up and go. And when you as a pilot or a nurse or any sort of worker sees that you're getting paid so much less than someone else that is actually doing work that is exactly the same, it doesn't encourage people to stay, the most experienced and some of the best workers. So it's a real retention and recruitment issue. It's a safety issue. And I think that basically because Air Canada had been locked in, Air Canada and the workers had been locked in such a long collective agreement, you saw that sort of drop in terms of the gap between what the going industry rate is versus what they were actually getting paid. And I think we're going to just see more and more labor unrest as unions and their workers agitate to get their workers exactly what is the going rate, and which it makes it actually affordable to live in this current climate.
You know, Air Canada and business groups have urged the federal government to intervene if talks fall apart, but the Prime Minister just yesterday indicated the government wouldn't step in. What do you make of that?
I think that's very interesting. So I don't know if some of your viewers may recall, but over just a couple of weeks ago, the Minister of Labour had intervened and ordered the Canadian Industrial Relations Board, which is the tribunal that oversees labor relations in the federal sector, to end a work stoppage at that time it was a lockout. So it was the employer locking out its own workers on CN Rail and CPKC. So what we saw there was the federal government intervening, and now the unions have challenged those actions in court, and it is no small feat to take away the right to strike. I think people have to understand that legal strikes only occur in very specific situations. And there are many number of technical steps that need to be reached, including strike mandate votes. In the case of this particular dispute between the pilots and Air Canada, 98% of the workers have turned out to vote, and they voted a 98% strike mandate. And that goes to show the employer that the union means business. And in order for it to evade economic hardship or inconvenience to its customers, it needs to get to its bottom line. And that's the whole process around the right to strike and collective bargaining. And the Supreme Court has said that is the powerhouse of Section 2D of the Charter, which protects the rights of free association. Without that, what you have are employers who will lay back and they will not drive to their hardest deal. And they have no real incentive to really bargain as hard. It's a tremendous sacrifice, obviously, for the workers themselves going on strike. It's not an easy decision. But ultimately, this is the last card the union has to play in terms of building leverage against the employer and forcing them to reach an agreement that both sides can live with.
Well, we've only got several hours to go before the deadline, so we appreciate all your insight. You'll be watching, we'll be watching. We really appreciate it, May.
It's very interesting. Yes. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, May. She's a union lawyer joining us here in Toronto. Just gorgeous out there this weekend, a perfect day to take a stroll through the park. Well, now there's a new place to explore. The City of Toronto unveiling Leslie Lookout Park. Brittany Billette takes us there.
Leslie Lookout Park is being called an oasis, located in what was an industrial wasteland.
It's hard to believe. This used to be an old, run-down industrial lot. And the city has reclaimed it and given it back to the community to use.
It's the first park project to be completed in the Portlands, an East End neighborhood in the making. Beachgoers say the space offers them a new way to enjoy the waterfront.
I love it. It's very nice. I like the watch-up tower. My favorite part might be the sand.
I think it's just an additional point of connection, a connection to the water, a connection to Tommy Thompson Park, connection to the future Portlands and Villiers Island. So yeah, no, very welcome.
With kids and everything, it's nice to have a place you can bring them over. Only thing I would say is like it would have been nice to have a park or like a playground or something, but yeah, you can't win everything.
When the fog isn't settled over the water, the city says the views from the lookout tower will be spectacular.
You will see the lake, you will see the skyline, and you can watch the sunset.
The 2-acre park is located along the Martin Goodman Trail near Tommy Thompson Park. The total cost of the project was $8.5 million. The city says its mini forest has about 5,000 plant species. The grounds of the park will help with stormwater management, and the lookout tower pays homage to Indigenous heritage.
The lookout tower really symbolizes, I think, a significant Indigenous placemaking for this community. It represents, when you look up to the sky, you will see the stars. The four openings really represent the directions that the Indigenous community sort of holds near and dear.
And inside the tower, another sentimental addition, a heart with the name of the project's designer, Claude Cormier, the celebrated Canadian landscape architect who died just a year ago.
Claude's legacy in Toronto, and in particular related to this park, are probably the kind of succession of Urban Beach that he started long ago with HTO and then with Sugar Beach and here at Leslie's.
The park is being unveiled at a time when people in the area are thinking about air quality. A recent report found that emissions from a nearby natural gas power plant could put future high-rise tenants at risk.
Portland's Energy Centre doesn't just affect here, it affects a very large part, actually the whole GTA, now that it's running 24 hours a day.
The city says it'll continue to work with its partners as it develops the Portlands, but this beach at its core signifies the area's potential and future as a new destination. Brittany Billette, CBC News, Toronto.
You can see it there in Brittany's story. You probably saw it around your neighborhood. Tons of fog hiding Toronto's skyline today, and it's been like that much of the day. Sophia, when I was getting on the train way out by Rouge Park, it sort of felt like a bit of a horror movie. I'm not gonna lie, just the fog coming in from the lake.
It is eerie, and it'll be with us, this fog bank, this eerie fog bank, for the next few days. It's a symptom of this glorious stretch of summer resurgence that we have right now. So get used to it, especially if you like the warmth that comes with it throughout the mid part of your day. We have the perfect recipe happening right now. Really light winds, not mixing down that low-lying cloud that's at the surface, cooling lake waters. Picture it as the bottom of the pot on the stove. And then over top, we have this lid, this ridge of high pressure, this glorious area of warmth that is rapidly cooling all of that moist air that's near the surface, creating this low-lying cloud that will be with us really for the next 2 or 3 days until we have a pattern change. But right now, that lid on the pot is firmly locked on. We have right now what's called a Rex block formation, which means that big ridge of high pressure is locked into place with low pressure below it, which means you will wake up Sunday morning to that same eerie bank of fog really everywhere from Brantford up to Haliburton. It will be a similar story Monday morning as well. Now, really, for many of you, this fog will mix down fairly quickly. Those of you in cottage country won't see much of it throughout the daytime. But for those of you anywhere around the lakeshore regions, this fog will stick around through much of your day. So if you are driving in it, be prepared for rapidly changing conditions. Maybe use your low beams as well, or give other vehicles a little bit more space. For everybody else, what a beautiful weekend to be dockside or patio side. Enjoy the high 20s while it lasts with just a tiny bit of humidity. This is really the perfect stretch of bluebird sky weather that will be with us. Yes, here's the spoiler alert for the long range. In fact, it could be one of our driest, warmest stretches that we've had so far in 2024. I'll tell you more about that in the long range and how this anomalous warmth goes all the way up to Hudson's Bay and James Bay. In fact, some areas of northern Ontario will be warmer this week than Los Angeles and San Francisco.
Wow.
Enjoy it while we can.
We are loving it. Thanks, Sophia.
You're welcome.
A vigil in Brampton today honoring people killed by drunk drivers.
An important opportunity to recognize and remember those who've been lost, but also as a reminder to the public that there's a human cost to decisions to drive impaired. We added 22 new names. Now, some of those were names that maybe got missed last year, just hadn't applied, but 22 new names. And every year at all of our monuments, we're adding new names of people who were killed recently. So it's frustrating to see when we're adding names from year to year.
Families joining Brampton city officials and MAD at Chinguacousy Park. That's where the Ontario Memorial Monument for Victims of Impaired Driving is located. It opened in 2023 and is engraved with the names of 158 people. Public health officials in Ottawa say a person who died last month had a rare mosquito-borne illness. It's the city's first confirmed confirmed human case of Eastern equine encephalitis, or EEE, a disease that very rarely transmits to humans.
Many people will actually have no symptoms or even know they've been infected with this, but about 5% of people will have this encephalitis syndrome. And if that happens, it's awful. This is inflammation of the brain. You can have fever, headaches, but it's severe. It leads to coma, sometimes seizures, and about a third of people who have this encephalitis syndrome will succumb to the illness.
Health officials now urging people to protect themselves from mosquito bites. EEE is normally transmitted between wild birds and mosquitoes, and sometimes it spreads to horses. There is no cure and no vaccine for people. We're heading into a short break now. We'll be back with you in just a few minutes. Today marks 2 years since the death of Mahsa Amini and the nationwide uprising that followed in Iran. Community members in Toronto coming together at a rally.
We salute all youth who lost their lives for the cause of freedom and democracy. The images of these young people, such as Mahsa Amini, Kian Pirfalak, killed by the regime, resonate today in our minds and souls.
Amini was just 22 years old when she died in the custody of Iran's morality police. They were holding her on allegations that she was not wearing her hijab to the liking of authorities. The protests that followed started with the chant, "Women, Life, Freedom." A powerful show of unity in France as women across the country show support for the mother and grandmother whose horrifying, decades-long assault made headlines around the world. Ithel Musa has more on the message behind today's movement.
Hundreds of women gathered in cities across France on Saturday in support of Gisèle Pellicot. The 72-year-old grandmother is at the center of a criminal case that has shocked the country. Her former husband of 50 years is on trial, accused of drugging her and recruiting dozens of men to secretly rape her while she was unconscious. I think this story really illustrates the extent to how women are not heard, says this woman, how they are not defended. And these days it seems like people are just discovering what rape is and that it happens every day. Pellicot waived her legal right to anonymity. She said she wanted her trial to be held openly to alert the public to sexual abuse and drug-induced blackouts. An open trial is a way for her to say that one can overcome this challenge, says Pellicot's lawyer Stéphane Bobineau, and that shame should switch sides. One expert says Pellicot's case also brings to light the issue of marital rape and the violence some women quietly suffer in their marriages.
We don't expect that our most, the most trusted person in our lives, a partner, would hurt us in this kind of way. And so it's a profound betrayal. And it's one where, I think some women who it happens to, they don't want to even recognize it.
Wright says Pellicot's case illustrates the work that still needs to be done to keep girls and women safe from sexual abuse, not just in France, but around the world.
I think it's really about taking responsibility for acknowledging power dynamics that exist around the sexual objectification of women and putting the onus on men and boys more to make sure that they're stepping up and doing the work to shift our society away from a rape culture.
The lawyer for Pellicot's former husband told French media he admits to the allegations against him. His daughter says she also believes he drugged and abused her. He and 50 other defendants in his former wife's case face up to 20 years in prison if found guilty. Ithel Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Closer to home, the 28th annual Ukrainian Festival in Toronto's Bloor West Village is underway this weekend. A festival goer told us it's a chance to connect with fellow Ukrainians in such hard times.
Honestly, I'm here to support the Ukrainian community. I come every year. My mom and I and my sister, we always come. I still speak Ukrainian, so it's nice to come down and kind of share the culture, but really don't like what's happening there. And at the end of the day, I do donate some money back, but, I think that this is a good place for everybody to kind of come together and kind of put that aside, not really think about it, right?
More than 900,000 visitors are expected to take over Bloor West. You can expect lots of food and family-friendly activities. Toronto's Ukrainian festival runs until Sunday.
Fáciles, pero no 30 años.
Lots of people out at Nathan Phillips Square celebrating Mexican Independence Day. Now, the holiday is actually on Monday, but it's being marked in Toronto today. There's plenty of good food, music, and dance. Mexican Independence Day has been celebrated in Toronto since 1994. The rescue team with Toronto Wildlife Centre had a busy summer saving goslings and ducklings. The Canadian geese nested on rooftops, in courtyards, and near pools. The team says they wanted to intervene before the family was up and walking.
They don't have the forethought for the fact that their babies take months to fly, which means they are now trapped on this roof. These guys were at the edge, which means they could have fallen quite a distance, and that is obviously a very big concern for us. Although they are quite light, they actually can damage themselves during falls.
Thanks to the rescue team, hundreds of hatchlings safely reached water without becoming separated from their families. Those are the kinds of stories we just love to see. We also love to see this heat continuing, Sophia.
Well, with the dramatic music from that rescue to the dramatic suspense of whether or not this nice stretch of weather is going to continue. Here is the spoiler alert. Yes, it's a rinse and repeat setup for the next few days. Really nice overnight sleeping conditions. We're around the mid-20s right now. And then Sunday's daytime high is about the same, not just here in the south, but all the way up into northern Ontario as well, where the feels-like values are into the low 30s right across the board. This is the situation where I love being a broken record. Same situation as well for Monday all across the region. What a great weekend if you were able to head up to the cottage or be at the campsite and enjoy a little bit of this late summer warmth now that we're back into the school year. Look at the temperature anomalies here. This heat, this ridge of high pressure goes all the way as north as Nunavut. Areas in northern Ontario, James Bay, Hudson's Bay. Seasonal right now should be the low teens, the mid-teens. Add on to that an extra 15 degrees, and you can see where the cooler areas are to our south and to our west. And this is precisely why that ridge of high pressure firmly blocked in place with nowhere to go. And hey, we're not complaining, but maybe they are towards the south and to the west. Look at San Fran and Los Angeles, 22, the mid-teens. We are a solid 10 to 15 degrees warmer than that. It will continue. Beautiful bluebird stretch for the next few days. In fact, it could be an 11-day dry stretch with warm weather as well. Maybe the longest we've had so far this year. The other longest stretch was back in February, but enjoy this. The one day that could be a toss-up could be Wednesday, when we could have some southerly moisture try to make its way up with a tropical disturbance looking to form. But until then, look at the long-range picture and how beautiful this stretch will be, Shannon.
30s, 31s, it's crazy.
Not bad, eh?
We'll
and the
take
overnight
it.
lows in the high teens, almost 20.
Which is comfortable and beautiful too. Thanks so much, Sophia.
You're welcome.
That's our show for tonight. We'll